Well, it's an absolute honour to be here today, and I'm extremely grateful for the next 12 minutes of your time. I think I speak on behalf of the majority of us here when I say that we like to think of ourselves as generous. We'd all like to think that if someone asked us for a helping hand, we'd lend them one. If they needed our advice, opinion, or counsel, we'd be only too pleased to give it. But the reality is that when the charity collection tin says, "Please give generously," we can't help but feel just a little bit smug as we slip our loose change into the slot. One could even argue that even a solitary £1 coin doesn't really amount to being especially generous. But I've never seen any rules or guidelines on generosity. So just who defines what generous is socially? Well, in fact, we do. All the time we're justifying our generosity to ourselves and others. But are we as generous as we'd like to perceive ourselves to be? Now, undoubtedly, if you give a little, you get to keep a lot, and you're seen to be giving. In 2012 to 2013, estimated total donations to charity here in the UK were £10.4 billion. Now, that's an extraordinary amount of money. And that was almost £1 billion more than was donated the year before. However, it's still less than just 1 year previously. Now, of course, the economic climate and society's financial pressures have changed dramatically. But could we perhaps not buy that one packet of cigarettes or not order another glass of wine and instead continue to give generously? It's not about the amount we give, because if everyone gave a little, collective generosity would mean we'd all be a part of giving a lot. And surely it's better to give something than not at all. Now, before you start writing letters, generosity is, of course, relative. And for many, generosity has to start at home. But is our generosity measured by how much we put in a tin? You can't put time into a tin, and yet for some, time is all they have. And for others, time is all they can afford. But in many cases, actually, time is all we need. And money doesn't solve everything. So is giving £1 a greater act of generosity than giving, say, 10 minutes of your time? Now, none of us, I'm sure, would readily agree to being greedy, I'm sure. It's far too negative a notion. No. Mrs. Jez will claim a sugar low as a perfectly justifiable reason for clearing out the top tray of a box of chockies. But that's not greed. Of course not. Whether you've got your eyes on the latest phone, a salary increase, or your chunk of an inheritance, why is it that we often find ourselves searching for something else? Better, bigger, faster. We are all greedy to an extent. And if you think you're not, well, you're wrong. You can't help it. It's hardwired into your brain to be greedy. But what use does greed have for us as a species? Evolutionists would argue it's what kept us alive and allowed us to evolve through stockpiling food while we were all running around in animal skin nappies. And that it helped drive our key survival behaviours. But does it have a justifiable use today? Both acts of generosity and greed trigger the chemical release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with happiness and reward. You see, when something nice happens to us, when someone shows us generosity, a little squirt of dopamine leaks out into our brain and makes us feel good as a result. But it's used up very quickly, so that good feeling goes away and that leaves us wanting more. The effect of dopamine is so strong that it motivates you to seek out more ways to get your fix. Now, we don't consciously seek out dopamine specifically, of course. Instead, we go out of our way, intensely looking for things that will make us feel good, to trigger its release. We might buy another pair of shoes, for example. Has anyone here got more than 7 or 8 pairs of shoes? Put your hands up, be honest, put your hands up if you've got more than 10 pairs of shoes. Incredible. What are you, madam, a spider? I mean, wanting another glass of wine or to win the lottery, or indeed another pair of shoes, is not necessarily a harmless greed, because all of these behaviours are self-rewarding. So greed can quickly become as much an ingrained character trait as optimism or honesty. Some say that the lottery is a tax on the poor, an act of greed. while others argue that the cost of their lottery ticket goes towards helping those in need and to good causes, and therefore is an act of generosity. But when you play the lottery, what's at the forefront of your mind? Are you thinking of the big boat, paying off the mortgage, and other aspects of financial freedom? Or are you thinking about how the amount you paid for your ticket is going to help others? There are certainly plenty of warnings surrounding us as a result of greed. The global financial crisis, the banking bonuses expose, and those beyond irritating calls about missold PPI. Now, while I'm sure no one person intended to cripple the global financial community, prevent millions from obtaining a mortgage, and plunge countries into debt, this lesson we're all learning the hard way does highlight my point. It was Erich Fromm, the social psychologist, who said, "Greed is a bottomless pit, which exhausts the person in an endless effort to satisfy the need without ever reaching satisfaction." We find ourselves chasing material objects because of what we perceive the result to be when we have them, happiness and a sense of fulfillment. But we're never satisfied because the effect of dopamine, that happiness and fulfillment, doesn't last very long. We can achieve those feelings by being greedy in a much more socially acceptable way, though, by seeking dopamine in other things. But I don't want to spend any more time talking about greed. You see, for me, as a behaviourist, I'm most fascinated by, perhaps unsurprisingly, behaviour. Why we do the things we do and how we can change them for the better. The person who wants leather seats for their next car and the person who gives their money to charity are driven to make those choices for very much the same underlying reasons. It's not about the leather seats, and nor is it about the charity as much as they might believe. I'll prove it. If one of your fingers fell off every time you did something that was greedy, or a horrible wave of anxiety ripped through your stomach with every act of generosity, you wouldn't do those things again, would you? You wouldn't do them because they had negative consequences for you. With the exception of forced behaviours, the only reason we repeat behaviours is because we enjoy them or they make us feel good. They are positively reinforced. In the case of generosity, it's good for others, but in turn, it also makes us feel good. And the bottom line is, it's about us. This altruistic battle is interesting, because although we can't not be greedy, we can choose how we let greed dictate our behaviour and choose in which ways we demonstrate that predisposition to be greedy. Therefore, we can control the impact our behaviour has on the greater good. When we see something that's improved, more expensive or bigger than we've already got, why are so many people attracted to it? Why is the propensity to be greedy just so tempting? Is it because our brain associates it will bring with it a bigger fix of dopamine and all of its associated positive effects? Allow me to try something a little bit different. I'm going to time how quickly you can get this balloon around the whole room and back to me. All right? Are you ready? Go! Oh, there we go. That's it. Try not to hurt anybody. If you've glasses, they're firmly tucked behind your ears. That will help. And wigs, we're about to find out. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Not quite the whole room, but I'll let you off. You did very well, and no one was hurt. Now listen to that little subdued laughter. That's my act of generosity for you. A little release of dopamine. That good feeling some of you all experienced is just what we generate for ourselves when we are greedy or when we are generous. Only when we are generous, it's not just us that feels the positive effects of our actions, but those on the receiving end too. But people search for material things to help make them happy. And it's this material greed that can be so dangerous, because it's not the inanimate objects we're buying or longing for that make us happy. It's not necessarily the results of our generosity that makes us feel good either. The big house in the country, the expensive holidays abroad, and the lottery win, or even this giant balloon, these things don't safeguard you from divorce, secure your job, or even prevent you from having a stroke. It's the dopamine that influences the choices we make that result in our happiness. It is time to stop chasing bigger and better, to understand what actually makes us happy and embrace a much more socially acceptable form of greed. the desire to be happy. Because if those things which give us the happiness and fulfillment we're all searching for are right there in front of us, in non-material things, in the things we know matter most to us, our families, our friends, our pets, surely we'd be better off seeking out those things. I'd like to share with you this idea I have. Start today by handwriting a card to someone you know. You just don't see that happen anymore, do you? Maybe to thank them, encourage them, or just to say hello. When we receive a handwritten card that's unexpected, we get that fizz inside. Perhaps you could spend 10 minutes more playing with your dog, or offer to donate some of your time to a local hospice or community group. We should strive to be more generous, to create more acts of generosity, which will not only help us to become better people, because we know that acts of generosity are good for both the person being generous and those on the receiving end. Acts like these help us to question and challenge ourselves more, our beliefs, our thoughts, our behaviours, much like I hope this talk today has done for you. As a result, I hope we will consider looking closer to home for other sources of happiness and fulfillment in non-material things, which we can access far more readily and cost-effectively. The result will be a reduction in material greed and an increase in happiness. So whichever act of generosity you choose, money or time, if we understand why we do the things we do just a little better, we'd not only be happier ourselves, but other people will benefit too. And that, surely, is for the greater good. Thank you.